What's up, Jet fans? Last night I watched Jets Game 10, Jets at Buffalo, a miserable 32-6 loss. It was a 4 o'clock game, not an 8 o'clock game, so I definitely had time to make this video the day it happened. But it was such a miserable loss. I was just like, I can't talk about this right now. I had to let it simmer, honestly, let my thoughts simmer. There's obviously big news with the Zach Wilson benching, and I'll get to my thoughts on that later. But first, going into this game, there was some um stuff with the Bills. They fired their offensive coordinator because they just had a really tough loss to the Broncos. And so the Jets are theoretically better than the Broncos, so there was some hope, and the Jets beat the Bills before. But I was like, well, whenever a team loses, I don't know enough about like each individual offensive coordinator on the Bills. But whenever a coach gets fired, it typically sparks the team to do really well. Look at the Raiders, for example. Even though I think the Raiders head coach was also the problem. Um, but in the Bills team, I don't know if the offensive coordinator was necessarily the problem, but firing him did spark the team, and the Jets were kind of at the back end of that, and kind of had to deal with the repercussions of that firing. But anyways, let's jump into the offense. Um, so first things first, Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle are on the screen right now, but I'll talk about them at the end of the offense. But first, before the game even happened, Michael Carter got cut. I was a fan of Michael Carter. I think just the situation wasn't really working, right? Because you had him; he was a starter his, I think, rookie year, and he got a bunch of carries anyways. And then Breece Hall came in, and obviously you want to have him play. Breece Hall got injured, which then put Michael Carter back in a rotation of backs. But I don't think Michael Carter was really that bad, and I think signing Dalvin Cook, yeah, you're like, oh, well, the third guy, and they have the rookie running back the Jets do that they want to start giving a few touches, and I get that, but I would have liked to see the rookie running back get some actual in-game carries. Until this game, he hasn't had a single attempt in an NFL game yet. So I would have liked to see that before they traded or cut Michael Carter. And yeah, I would have liked to see them trade him at least, because I think you could have gotten something for him. He's a good back who just isn't getting rushing attempts because the Jets have Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. And well, to be honest, they at the end of games where you would start having the rotation of backs, they can't run it then because they have to be throwing it because they're down typically. Um, and so I just, but that's not even about this game. So he's been cut, so it's tough to see him. I know the people in the locker room like him, but he's gone. Also, another thought I had watching this game was, is Xavier Gibson really that good of a returner? I know he had the amazing punt return for a touchdown in overtime, which got the Jets the first win, and I mean that game is still. It seemed like that game happened yesterday, and all the other games happened a really long time ago. All their tough losses, but that game is still in my memory, and I know he's beloved by the fan base, and I think you could still give him some get him involved in the passing game, but I don't know how good of a returner he is. He like fumbles it a few times. He fumbled it this time. I think he also, it's hard to say benched. He wasn't always the returner in this game because I think the coaching staff is realizing that he's not maybe the greatest returner. But maybe get him involved in the passing game. I'm not giving up on him as a player. I just don't know if returner is his what he should be doing right now. Um, and then lastly, before I get into the big news, Mekhi Becton got injured, and once again, I think the announcers are saying this is the 8th shakeup of offensive line the Jets have had. Their offensive line, I don't really like Mekhi Becton that much, but he's better than anything else they have on that team, and he's injured now. And so, just another brutal loss to the offensive line. All right, now I'll talk about Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and forgive me, this might be a rant. There have been so many fans calling for Zach Wilson's benching, which I completely disagree with. Um, Call me a Zach Wilson truther or whatever, but I don't consider myself a supporter of him. It's just relatively speaking, I think I am. Because clearly, I don't think you can say the issue is his fault. He's not the one messing up. Yes, he had a terrible interception last game, absolutely, and he had a pretty bad interception this game. Yes. But if you watch the games, right? If you just go down the numbers, yes, those are bad. And even those specific snaps of those interceptions, those were bad interceptions. But if you actually watch the games, he's getting zero support. His offensive line cannot pass block at all. His tight ends drop the ball. His receivers, other than Garrett Wilson, which Garrett Wilson didn't have a good game this week as well, but other than Garrett Wilson, his receivers are playing terribly. I'm saying playing because I don't think Alan Lazard is terrible yet, and Xavier Gibson is still a rookie. But they're playing terribly. I mean, I don't know. So what is Zach Wilson supposed to do? He has to scramble, which he's good at. Tim Boyle cannot scramble. If you watch that game, he got benched. Zach Wilson got benched at the end of the third quarter. Um, Tim Boyle cannot move, so he got destroyed. And watching the game, look at Tim Boyle's numbers. He threw an interception. So I don't even think Tim Boyle played terribly. He just didn't have a chance to play because he was getting pressured and sacked so much because his offensive line is terrible. And so you cannot blame Zach Wilson at all. Is Zach Wilson great? Absolutely not. Does he make terrible interceptions? Yes. But he also makes good throws that his receivers drop. He can't make he doesn't have time to make great throws because the offensive line collapses. Um, so I get Zach Wilson isn't playing well, but I don't think benching him is the answer. And then if you actually, we'll get into this when I could talk about the defense, but the defense stopped trying once Zach Wilson got benched because the Jets said we give up. So I'm not sure what they're going to do in the future. I still think Zach Wilson is he's not the answer, but he's the best thing the Jets have right now because Aaron Rodgers is injured. So I don't understand the benching. And the fans who are calling for it, well, yeah, you want Tim Boyle, who also threw an interception because he's struggling with all the things that Zach Wilson is struggling with. Neither one of these quarterbacks has time to do anything because the offensive line is terrible. And when they do have time, the receivers drop the ball or fumble it. Garrett Wilson had a fumble. So I don't get me wrong. I like Garrett Wilson a lot. I like Breece Hall. They have some really good young stars on this team, but one, the offensive line is terrible. Excuse me. And then two, the the offensive line is terrible. And then two, the receivers are dropping it, and their big stars are making mistakes. Breece Hall didn't have a great game in the run game, anyways. Um, Garrett Wilson had a fumble, so you cannot blame it all on the quarterback, and I think fans are too quick to do that, and I think the coaches are too quick to do that because they need a scapegoat right now because they're getting so many penalties. That's also another thing. They're getting so many penalties. Um, their offense is looking terrible, and I don't think Robert Saleh is the issue either, but he needs to blame it on someone, and I think they're going to try to blame it on Zach. So we'll see, but I think Zach Wilson deserves to start over Tim Boyle. Um, and so yeah, I'm sorry about that rant, but the fans calling for Zach Wilson's benching, I don't know what they're not watching the games honestly. Like you look at the stats and it's like, oh, that's terrible. But if you watch the game, you're like, oh, Zach Wilson has like 0 seconds to get any throw off. And when he does, he has 0 seconds, but when he scrambles out of it and then throws the ball, it's a drop. So like which counts as an incompletion. And some of his interceptions, just like Tim Boyle's almost interception, I think, which was deflected and it wasn't counted as an interception. That was a receiver like hit the ball up. That's not his fault. Um, it's the team's fault. So I don't know. We'll see. I think blaming it on Zach Wilson is so dumb, and maybe watch the games. Sorry. Anyways, the defense, once again, another thing that the scoreboard doesn't fully tell you. The defense played really well for most of the game. The Jets put them in terrible field, the offense put them in terrible field position, and then they held the Bills to multiple field goals, which was really good to see. Um, and so they did. But I think, like I said, when Zach Wilson got benched and the game got out of hand, they then kind of gave up, which you don't like to see. But I also kind of get the Jets weren't coming back in this game. Um, but they gave up. And then, yes, this is a photo of one of the fights. There were 3 fights. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but it seemed like some of them were instigated by the Bills, which doesn't make any sense since they are the ones winning. Typically, the losing team gets really angry. Um, but yeah, so there were some fights. I guess maybe just the in-state rivalry or something. And I'm sure Robert Saleh's quote about destroying good quarterbacks doesn't help the situation. But which was that quote was blown out of proportion as well. But um um or embarrassing quarterbacks. But there were 3 fights. But I think even though it's a 32-6 loss, the defense played well. Because they held them so many field goals with terrible. It basically the offense was already in field goal position by the time the defense was on the field, and then they just kind of gave up at the end of the game because why risk your body for the an obvious loss? So we'll see in the future, but I don't have much to complain about the defense this week. And so the conclusion, right? Watching this game, I said it last week once they lost to the Raiders, but the season seems basically over. They're probably going to lose to the Dolphins, which is, and then I don't know if there's any coming back from that. Um, I like I said, I don't think Zach Wilson's the issue. I hope he starts next week because Tim Boyle had all the same issues that Zach Wilson had because none of them had the chance to do anything. So you cannot blame it on Zach Wilson. And then thinking beyond this season, or maybe at the end of the season, but I'm thinking beyond the season, Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers being there isn't magically going to fix the offensive line. He might fix some of the receivers. He might fix Allen Lazard. But he's not going to be able to fix, and he might fix the penalties with his leadership or whatever, but he's not going to be able to fix the talent level on this offensive line. And if you put Aaron Rodgers out there again with this offensive line, he's going to get injured again. And if he gets injured next year, that's done. Because Aaron Rodgers being on the Jet for 3 years, we'll see, but I don't know. I don't think so. So you need to fix this offensive line before you can put Aaron Rodgers out there because he's going to get killed. I don't know how to do that. The first round pick the Jets have absolutely has to be offensive line. I see some people talking receiver, and I get that, but I think it has to be offensive line because that's the issue. It starts there, and then maybe we can fix the receivers with later round picks or free agency. And that's going to be the other thing. Spend big on offensive line free agents. The Jets had some cap space going into this year, which I really disagreed with. They should have just invested that into the offensive line. But hopefully next year they'll be able to spend some offensive line. So free agents, draft picks, because anything is better than this offensive line right now. So I don't know, but you cannot, and that's why I don't really want Aaron Rodgers to come back this year because I think he'll get destroyed again, and that would be absolutely miserable. So we'll see. I'm sorry for the downer video, but I think a few more of those for the Jets are going to come at the end of the season. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so. Tell me what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Bye.